There we go. There.
Every time I do this, this is a nightmare.
About 20 seconds there, TJ.
Yeah, I've tried moving things around. I don't like seeing the door in the background. I'd rather have all the cool stuff. So I finally got to the point where I've stopped collecting
there we
things.
Go.
All right, you guys all set?
Yeah.
There we go.
Dr. Pat Show. Talk radio to thrive by. Powerful, inspiring, and coming to you live, bringing you stories of people like you and me busting through and living life full out. Get ready to dare to wonder what your life would be like if you knew you could not fail.
Hey, everybody. Welcome. It's so great to have all of you tune us in and turn us on. Really exciting day today. Look, one of the things we wanted to do is, first of all, later on today, and we'll give you the details of this, but for the moment, I got to back off of my microphone there. Later on today, you will hear Mark Anthony and I do our show together, The Psychic and the Doc. And so today we're doing almost like a part one of that show. It is, for me, we're going to be talking about the energy of faux, fright, and freedom. And what does this mean as you delve into the minds of these strange bedfellows? Later on today, we're going to be talking about Mark's favorite topic, I think, which is Friday the 13th. So we're going to kind of give you a little bit of a piece of each of it today, early on this show. And of course, we'll open up phone lines. But later on today on The Psychic and the Doc, that's 4 p.m. Pacific time on Transformation Talk Radio. One of the things I want to say, it is already a highly popular show. We're opening up phone lines. We're going to be talking about Friday the 13th. And I don't know, I'm working on getting my head to spin 360 degrees, and maybe I will have green vomit, but I don't know if I can get that done by 4 o'clock today.
Wow. I mean, things are possible, though. I mean, think positive? I don't know how to say anything off of that one.
Yeah. So this is it. We're talking about, now look, this is what I want to say about this show. For those of you that know Mark Anthony, he needs no introduction. For those of you that know me, I don't even know how to introduce myself. But today, I want to say you're talking with somebody, best-selling author, the psychic lawyer, the psychic explorer, award-winning, critically acclaimed. He does more media than anybody I know, and I do a lot. But fourth-generation psychic medium, what does that mean to Friday the 13th? For me, I'm Dr. Pat. I have known and been known as that person that works with you on how to get street smart in your life. So today, fasten your seatbelts as we take a shot at looking into the mind of faux, fright, and freedom. Mark, are you ready?
I am ready, Dr. Pat. Thank you for having me on the show, and to all the listeners, hello.
And this is a version of The Psychic and the Doc. And honestly, I thought we were going to play that intro, but we didn't get the memo to Benny. But here's the thing I want to say about it. Let's talk about, when you and I decided to talk about faux, fright, and freedom, what was the first thing that came up for you when you're thinking about it?
Well, there's a lot of facets to that. And, what's going on right now, our very democracy is being put to the test. And, you and I are very good about not weighing in on either side, because the thing is, we have people that like this show and The Psychic and the Doc on both sides of the aisle, and we certainly don't want to alienate anybody. But faux, fright, and freedom is something that many of us take for granted. We have to realize, like, yesterday was Veterans Day, and I put up a post and I said, it's Veterans Day. Let's put aside our differences and honor the men and women who sacrificed their lives so that we can express those differences. And that is a big part of faux, fright, and freedom, because we take that for granted. And I've been to dictatorships, absolute monarchies, and places all over the world where there is no expressing another opinion. There's one opinion, and guess what? It's not the opinion of the people.
Yeah.
And so I think it's with Friday the 13th, Veterans Day, and the aftermath of the election, I think a lot of people are afraid. And last week, Dr. Pat, our show was about living in uncertain times. Well, this is kind of the show in that wake, because still we are living in uncertain times.
I got to do it. Benny.
Yep.
I got to do it.
Okay.
Busted flat in Baton Rouge, waiting for a train. When I was feeling nearly faded as my jeans, Bobby thumbed down, diesel down, just before it rained. And I rode us all the way to New Orleans. I pulled the harpoon out of my dirty red bandana. I was playing soft while Bobby sung the blues. Yeah. Windshield wipers slapping time. I was holding Bobby's hand in mine. We sang every song our driver knew. Why? Freedom's just another word for nothing left to lose. Benny, you want to play that?
I think you're doing just
I mean,
fine. I think we're.
honey, if it ain't free.
We won't be cleared. I think you did. You did amazing.
That was
Freedom's
great.
just another word for nothing left to lose. I mean, think about these words. If we get to that point where freedom is just another word for nothing left to lose. And she goes on to say, nothing, I mean nothing. But then she says, honey, if it isn't free. And I love those words of the late and great Janis Joplin. Because we need to bring the free back to freedom today. Isn't that what you're talking about, Mark? When you're talking
Absolutely.
about political systems and angst, in this country, you and I get to stand up and say, oh my God, am I going to say this? Please, all of you beautiful Bernie Sanders fans, please don't send me hate mail, because I only mean this in the best of spirit. I get to say to Bernie, help me understand like I'm a fifth grader. Explain to me what it would look like if you actually switched parties and became a Democrat. So I asked that very simple question because I'm looking at a bigger picture. But see, in the United States, we could pretty much ask what you want, except we're not going to talk about conspiracy theories because we don't want Facebook to put up a little big fat sign. What are you talking about, Mark? What is the crux of what you're feeling today?
Well, think about, let's not talk about the U.S. Let's talk about Russia. Okay, you just had Vladimir Putin's number one opponent ends up getting poisoned.
Yeah.
All right. Kim Jong-un in North Korea, most of his family disappears, and we pretty much know what happened to them. This is nothing new. This is nothing unusual. In fact, for most of human history, that has been the rule rather than the exception. And 240 some odd years ago, a group of men had a radical idea that maybe for the first time in history, there should be a government of the people, by the people, and for the people. And that totalitarianism and absolutism and vesting all power into one person should be stopped, ergo checks and balances. So, America is far from perfect. And what we also have to realize, we're the great experiment in democracy. We're an idea, a concept, and we are fragile. And right now, this is being put to the test. But Dr. Pat, call me an incurable optimist.
Me too.
But I think we're going to be just fine. And I actually think that all this turmoil that's going on right now is good in the long run, because it's flushing to the surface so much of the undercurrent, so much of people that feel that they're being disenfranchised, people that have traditionally been disenfranchised, people who have been afraid to express their feelings. All this is coming to the surface because we need to deal with it. I mean, as a psychologist, is denial and avoidance a behavior that helps solve problems?
Hey, Pat, you got to unmute yourself there, darling.
Oh, I know. I
There
was
we
just
go.
talking to
Thanks.
myself right there before I actually unmuted myself because I had to warm up for that, Benny. I
Sometimes
had
you
to
just
warm
got
up
it.
for the
Sometimes you
answer.
got it. I get
So
it.
did you see my mouth moving like before I even said something?
Yep.
So what I'm saying is, without getting all psychological, here's the thing that we learn in psychology. There are things and behaviors we do that help us for the moment we're in. Let me give you an example. At 6 years old, my mom commits suicide. So there's a part of how that impacted my life then, and there are coping mechanisms that we develop. But it's almost like break even analysis in finance. Like if you ever take an economic class, which I did, you get to this thing called break even analysis, where up until a point, things kind of working towards the same goal, and then they don't. It's like a crisscross on a financial page where one goes in one direction and one goes in the other. There's a point where denial works really, really well. And then there's a point where it stops.
Yeah.
And most of us only recognize that by the amount of pain we experience on the inside and how we act that out on the outside. Let me give you an example. Growing up in the 60s, Mark, right? Growing up in the 60s and walking through Central Park and watching my friend, a gay man, get knifed and beaten in front of me, that will change you to step out of the realm of denial. That will change you. I talked to Allison Jacobson this morning. She's called the safety mom. Losing her infant, then her husband in a wheelchair, that changed her to become the safety mom. That changed her to be a spokesperson. So what we're seeing is the unshackling of denial by groups of people right now.
Yes.
Black lives matter. Black lives have always mattered, but they matter in a way now where it isn't one-sided. When we went through the 60s and people marched, they marched separately. Yes. Did you see people that were of white skin march with Martin Luther King? Yeah, there's stories about them, but they're few and far between. Now what we have is the face of denial is being ripped down from people, not this group or the other. But in that realm, there is a fight for freedom. All of us, Mark. We fight for freedom on the inside until we no longer can hold that back, right?
Right.
We watch things happen in other countries. We become spokespeople for people like Nelson Mandela getting incarcerated. But now we live in the United States of America, and our freedom has never been more in front of us than before. We can speak out, we can act out, we can do out because we live here, don't we?
We do. And, also taking the flip side of the coin, fear, that's what we're talking about, fear. And think about the people who are afraid of the Black Lives Matter movement. They feel that somehow they're going to be disenfranchised, that somehow they're going to be reverse discriminated against. And I think it's important for their feelings to be expressed and discussed as well. And I posted a quote from Abraham Lincoln the other day on my Facebook page. I said, "Whoever wins, stay calm." And the Lincoln quote was, "We are not enemies, we are friends." Now, he said that in 1861. And of course, there's a lot of, the cynics writing, "Oh, isn't that before Americans started killing each other?" And it's like, yes, it was, because we weren't talking, okay? The talking stopped. And fear is what is motivating. Fear leads to anger, which leads to rage and violence. And the fears of everybody need to be addressed and discussed. And so that's what we're talking about today is fear, foe, or freedom. And overcoming fear is part of freedom. When you look at being afraid of the government, fearing the government, that's a terrifying thing. Like I said, I've been to dictatorships where fearing the government was a very, very real thing. I've seen people rounded up and just yanked off the street. And of course, things like that happen here, but it's supposed to be through due process and the warrant requirement. And, there's a legal process for all of that. But, fear is motivating a lot of negativity, and that's why it is so important for us to have these dialogues where people are expressing what their fears and what their concerns are. In the final analysis, having been around the world, people are people. I have found that it doesn't matter what religion, race, ethnic background, your belief system, whatever. Most people want the same thing. They want to live in a neighborhood that they feel is safe. They want their children to feel loved. They want food on the table. They want to come home after a job to someone who cares about them, who loves about them. They want a roof over their head. They want peace. I would say probably over 99% of the people in the world, that's what they want. And so when we start expressing our fears, we'll find that there's so much commonality in what we're afraid of. And by discussing that, we're going to start dispelling it. And so that's why my mantra is, look, whoever wins, whatever the vote count is, people who disagree with you are not the enemy. They just have different ideas on how to solve problems facing all of us. And that's what makes America, America. And that's what makes a democracy a democracy.
I think that what we're talking about here today is, what does the journey look like from the inside out to get to that place of acceptance? And that is an inside job, Mark, right? We know that.
Sure.
But there are times we cannot do it alone. I mean, I've had a lot of help in my life. I've had a lot of people help me, and I'm not afraid to ask for help now. But there are moments that you're right. We get afraid. We get afraid. There's moments like, for somebody like me, I have been fighting for rights most of my life. Not just for me, but for other people, but for things that I believed in. That's what we do here. That's what we can do here. But how do we move forward in this realm of our belief, our willingness, and our freedom to protest? How do we do this and still respect the dignity of each other? Because I think that's part of the fear now. It's when you go from fear to foe. See, there's that line, right, that
Yep.
we cross where I'm afraid, that's great. But I'm afraid because what? You're an idiot. No, that's like fear to foe, right? We're not saying that we're not human. And we got the freedom to be afraid here.
Yeah.
Right? And then we express that. But there's such a super energy that we can help people with today to move to the place where you don't go through the middle, which is called foe, and you go right from fear to freedom. You see what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
But a lot of times it goes from, my friend corrected me. She says it starts with foe. I don't know. Fear to foe, and then maybe we can get to freedom. We want to take the foe out, because the foe ain't no mo.
Yeah, and I keep getting back to demonizing people who don't agree with you. That one of the reasons I put that quote on Facebook. I was doing a social study of my own, and most of the people are getting it. But then there are people, well, the left wing has been doing this, the right wing has been doing that, and it's like, okay, boys and girls, that's exactly what I've been talking about. We're demonizing each other. Okay. Not all Democrat ideas are bad. Not all Democrat ideas are good. Not all Republican ideas are bad. Not all Republican ideas are good. I mean, it's like, why, but we have to discuss them. When you look at through our founding fathers, we think of them as this monolithic group of noblemen. Well, George Washington, okay, and Thomas Jefferson, the first and third presidents, owned human beings. Okay, they were slave owners. And in between them came John Adams. And they didn't like John Adams. And in fact, when the Adams-Jefferson election, Jefferson accused John Adams of being a hermaphrodite. And I'm like, whoa, we think that the news media gets nasty now. Thomas Jefferson accused John Adams of being a hermaphrodite and essentially transgendered in the day.
Yep.
Benjamin Franklin owned a newspaper and used to print the most scathing things about people under pen names and pseudonyms. When you start looking at how dirty and nasty our politics were from day one. But what was fascinating is George Washington served 2 terms, and he very well could have been elected to a 3rd term, but he voluntarily relinquished power when John Adams was elected. Now, John Adams and Thomas Jefferson, Adams was the president, Jefferson was his VP, they hated each other, okay? And then when Jefferson won, Adams refused to show up at the inauguration. Now, I'm not saying of Jefferson. Now, I'm not saying that history is going to repeat itself in January, but if I were a betting man, I'd say it probably is. So we have to look at the past as prologue. We've been through these things before. We got through them. And what we have to see, and what you're very, very incisively identifying, Dr. Pat, is where the fear turns into foe. Right. And where the dialogue broke down was in 1861. And we stopped talking, and it did turn into open civil war. Yeah. And we need to make sure that such a horrific thing never happens again. And that's going to start by don't demonize someone because they disagree with you. You can say, well, I don't agree with their ideas, and I think their ideas are idiotic. Attack the problem, not the person.
There's a new TV show that's coming out, and I'm not going to get it right. I'd like to go to a break and we can talk about it. There's a new TV show that's coming out, but there are a couple things that I want to point to about this for those of you out there. We're going to talk about what the bridge is to go from fear, skip foe, and go to freedom. It is the most exquisite and beautiful energy on the planet. It not only is this place where you will feel this sense of unleashing your light, but you will not have to undo the absolute shackles of an energetic demise of foe. That's what we're doing today. Now, for those of you out there, if you want some help with this, if you want to see if there's someone on the other side, because I'll tell you who's on the other side for me. It's my stepmom. She's saying, you got to talk about this, child. You got to talk about this. I could hear my stepmom doing that because mom and dad were not of the same party. They were not of the same opinion. They were not. But what did they create in us to help us understand? And here's what I want to say. Are you ready to annihilate the foe energy in you? I'm not saying doe like a deer. I'm saying like foe, like in a horror movie. We're going to take a short break, everybody. When we come back, we're taking your calls. 1-800-930-2819. Who is it that is out there energetically for you to help you guide a pathway to freedom? And, you know, we're mentioning politics, but it isn't about politics today. It's really the energy of who we are and who we want to be. You know, it's when we can no longer sit down with our friends because they have one opinion about something or the other. Let's get rid of this for good. Benny, let's take a short break. We'll be right back with Mark Anthony and me, Dr. Pat. Hey guys, are we at break?
Yeah, I got the break queued up on Facebook.
Okay. Hey, Benny. Oh, I may have gone to break too early for Benny. We may still be live right now.
Well, if we are, we want everyone to tune in tonight at 4 p.m. Pacific, 7 p.m. Eastern to The Psychic and the Doc, your paranormal power unleashed. And Dr. Pat and I will be rocking from this side to the other side.
Yeah, and we're going to talk about Friday 13th too, because it's not Friday the 13th, but here's what it is. Ready for this? We are in the medium zone. 11:11 over here. That was like yesterday. 11:13 over here. We're in the transitionary zone on the 12th. So what we're talking about is, what is the energy of this? And what does it mean? We're going to be talking about the same thing tonight, but a little bit differently. Mark, what I love about this is there is a mental brainwave you can measure when we are in fear, and then we move to anger. See, when we're talking about foe, that's anger, isn't it?
It is.
Yeah.
It is. Yeah. It's people think that hatred is the opposite of love, and it isn't. The opposite is total indifference. Because hatred requires commitment. Love requires commitment. What's the opposite of commitment is apathy, absence of any feeling.
Yeah.
And that's why our exes are always such horrible people. And you got to get to the point where him or her or whatever is no longer something that you feel one way or the other. If you're totally over a relationship,
when's that going to happen? No, just kidding.
Yeah, well, it's everyone's a work in progress, and but it's also, you have to realize that there was something about that person that you did love at one time, and that brought out maybe some really positive things. But
Mhm.
and it's the same thing with I live in a neighborhood where there's signs for both sides all over the place.
You mean like vote for me signs?
Yeah, vote for me signs, and I just talk about the weather.
Well, I mean, come on. We're talking about faux, fright, and freedom.
Yeah.
And I'm gonna, when we come back, I'm hoping we're gonna go to the phone lines here, 1-800-930-2819. But when I was going through one of the toughest times of my life, I was handed a book. And the book that I was handed was a book by Viktor Frankl. And many people don't even know who Viktor Frankl is, by the way. They don't know that, they don't know his story. They don't know what he created. We don't talk about him much. We say, dang, World War II, what was that? We don't know. Like we say Auschwitz or concentration camps. You want to talk about an energy, right? And then people are like, what was that? Ouch, what? What? Oh, okay. So you don't know about that. You don't know about World War II. Yeah. So, Benny, are you here?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So we went to break. Did you know that?
I did not. Sorry about that. I was actually in the restroom. My apologies.
Okay.
Was
Are
one
we
a
at
little
break now,
emergency
or
there.
are we just chit-chatting still? Because
Nope.
I'm going to keep rolling.
We're still live, but I mean, sorry.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
All right. So, TJ, let's bring us live. Mark is back. And sorry for that, everybody.
Yeah.
We are just in the middle of such enormous energy right now. And Mark and I, we weren't sure we went to break because, sometimes you got to go to break and you got to go to break.
And nature calls. It does happen.
Yeah, and and the thing about Dr. Pat and I, we have no lack of topics to discuss.
No, we don't. So for those of you out there, if you want to call into the show right now and just get a sense of what Mark can bring through to help you on this, because this is about, how do we get rid of fear? What do we do about it? 1-800-930-2819. And,
Right.
I talked about Janis Joplin. You had to be back at that time to understand what she was talking about. And by the way, thank you for texting me. I do know that that song was written, I believe, by Chris Christopherson. And you're right. It was never supposed to be Bobby McGee. Benny, did you know this?
No, I did not actually.
No, the song was not Bobby McGee. But I think Chris Christopherson, when he first heard it, it was Bobby McKee, Kee. And like he heard it as McGee. So I don't know. Me and Bobby McKee. No, McGee sounds better. I like that. 1-800-930-2819. Mark, fear. Look, it's as much a part of us as freedom is in the United States. But Viktor Frankl made it very clear. And Viktor Frankl wrote a pivotal book and talked about his experiences. When you read his book, like I did the first time, and this is before I was even anything interested in anything about the mind at all. No interest at all. That wasn't me in my life. I didn't understand it, but I didn't understand my life either. And somebody handed me this book, and the book changed my life because I read the book about a man in a concentration camp. right? So concentration camps were prevalent in World War II. And of course, we're referring to Germany, but they existed in different countries. But it was this place where the Jewish population and others were incarcerated and put in, and ultimately put in ovens, tortured, experimented on. That is a real thing. But this guy, this amazing psychiatrist, Viktor Frankl, he went into this camp and he did something unusual. He talked and created something of the mind. And I'll read some of the excerpts. But it's not that he was in denial about the fact that he was in a concentration camp, Mark. He just held a different perspective about his life and himself. He held a perspective of his beloved. And when you read the words of what he said to himself, you walk away from that book saying, wow, is there anything that I cannot shift my energy about? And today we want to help you shift energy. We have opened up the phone lines to see, maybe you'll get some insight from the other side or this side, 1-800-930-2819. But we live in an energetic skin, Mark. And, you and I are always shifting energy. And we're human beings as well, aren't we?
Yeah, yes, we are. And, fear, there's a lot of, like, especially in the metaphysical realm, there's this thought that all love is good and all fear is bad. And I don't think it's anywhere near that simplistic. All love is not good. If you fall in love with a sociopath, that is not a good thing. And as an attorney, I have seen a lot of people who have done exactly that, or people who fall in love with someone that's a drug addict or an alcoholic, that can have disastrous results. However, love is a very powerful and a very healing force. All fear is not necessarily a bad thing. I mean, sticking your hand into a bucket full of rattlesnakes, I think it's good to be afraid of doing that. But fear is a terrible state to live in, and the infliction of fear has been used as a form of manipulation and control by government, by religion, by bullies. Okay, bullies control and manipulate by fear, and being liberated from fear is a beautiful thing. I mean, think how many times in the New Testament, in the Gospels, where Jesus says, "Fear not," because what he was trying to convey to people is that you really shouldn't be afraid of God. You really shouldn't live in a state of fear, and to replace that fear with a love for yourself, a love for your fellow humans. And a lot of what's going on in our country now, when Jesus was asked the question, who is my neighbor? Okay, that applies now. Who is your neighbor? And he talked about the Good Samaritan. We're all familiar with that parable. And Samaritans didn't like Jewish people, but the Samaritan in the story comes to the rescue of a Jewish man who's horribly beaten and left for dead. And so, who is my neighbor now? If you're a Democrat, your neighbor is the Republican. If you're an independent, your neighbor is the Democrat or the Libertarian. We are all each other's neighbors. And I like to look at the United States not so much as a melting pot, but as one big dysfunctional family. And sometimes families don't get along and they argue and they get angry with each other. But that doesn't mean we need to be afraid of each other. Nobody should be afraid of expressing their opinions. And people should not be afraid that if they express their opinion, there's going to be violence inflicted upon them. And so I think that with flushing all of these ideas this turmoil to the surface, people have an opportunity. They have an opportunity to address these fears and to reduce them. And look at it this way. We have lived through how many different presidents? Okay, America swings to the right, then it'll swing to the left, then it'll swing to the right, and then it'll swing to the left, and we're still here. So look at the past and look forward to the future. Oh, you're muted again, Dr.
Yeah,
Pat.
the thing that to me that's really different, Mark, and maybe it's not different, maybe I'm different. Let me just say that. But what seems different to me now Okay, I'm going to go a little old school on you. Um, even at his worst, and I have to go back to Richard Nixon. I mean, talk about polarization,
Sure.
right? But even at what people call one of the worst points in our history, and I want to be clear about what these are. These were not times of peaceful protests. None of us engaged in peaceful protests. Did we try? We did. We sat. We wouldn't get out of the streets. There were things that were done that turned into horrific acts of violence. Horrific. But that is the time we had to go through here. That is the time. And, Aretha Franklin was, believe it or not, yes, Aretha. She was in her own right, a beautiful activist, right? She talked about peace until it doesn't work anymore in her own way. And it's hard for me. My mama used to say to me, my mama from the South, Doris, Mama Doris, whenever we would talk and I would tell her, well, she would be like, well, where are you marching now, honey? Where are you going now? Can I come? I'm like, Mama, you can come. You want to come up here to New York? No, we're going to march down here. I said, okay. She said, don't get yourself killed. Just like, okay. But that was that. My dad, on the other hand, my dad was a little bit different. My dad was, this guy that grew up at a time of violence. He grew up at a time where carrying a gun was the thing to do. And believe it or not, when my dad got older and he got a security job at age 70 something, they gave him a gun again. And I thought, oh my goodness, it's like, look out. But that was then, this is now. Here's the difference for me. We could argue politics. We could talk about wrong and right. We could talk about, was that right for you to break into somebody's Democratic National Convention file drawers? Was that illegal? And most people would say that is not a good thing. Today, we are separated on what's right and what's wrong. We're separated on values. And when you're separated on values, you move from fear to foe. Because you're right and I'm wrong. How do we get beyond that so we can have a conversation and honor each other?
I think that, well, traditionally, Americans have come together when there's an external threat. If, and look, I don't want to plunge us into a war,
Yeah.
But look at the aftermath of 9/11. All of a sudden, Americans were all galvanized. We were all together. Certainly after Pearl Harbor, and you go throughout history, people have been galvanized. I think that maybe if our politicians would work on something that is of a common benefit to everyone, I don't know, like infrastructure, okay, like rebuilding our roads, our airports, maybe we need to start with some very basic fundamentals before we get into changing any type of structure of society or things that might be deemed socialism or things that might be deemed social Darwinism, by either side. I think that the foundation of going from foe to freedom is appealing to what everybody needs, what everybody wants. And I think everybody wants clean air, clean water, safe roads, airports that work, bridges that don't collapse. I think if we started there, we need to realize that as human beings, what unites us is stronger than what divides us. It's what I was talking about earlier. Most people in the world, we all want safe neighborhoods. Well, there's a thought on one side that the Biden and Harris administration will turn our neighborhoods into war zones. And then there's a feeling from the Biden-Harris camp about the Trump camp that all of a sudden neo-Nazis are going to be marching down the streets. We got to realize that people on both sides aren't going to tolerate either one of those. And so what unites us is more powerful than what divides us. And I think that's where the focus needs to be right now. So it may not be, changing healthcare. It may not be changing our tax structure. It may be with some basic services that everybody needs, everybody uses. And I'm just throwing that out there. I mean, and that certainly sounds more simplistic than it is. But when people realize that, the definition of politics is the allocation of resources. And so the fight is, once again, it all comes down to money. Okay, it's all about money. Who spends the money? What do you spend it on? So maybe we should start spending on something that everybody uses and everybody needs. And let's start there. And let's bring this tension level down. I think that would be, for me, that would be the important starting point.
And I want to step back for a minute and really piggyback off your saying, but I would be remiss if I didn't talk about the youth for a minute. I have been around for a while, and I know what it's like to be in the streets. I know what it's like to watch Matthew Shepard. I know what it's like to see women go in a dark alley to get an abortion and die. I know what all of that is like. But there's something that I think we have to acknowledge today. And there's a beautiful film that if it's not out now, it's going to come out now by award-winning director and producer. And it's called The Day I Had to Grow Up. And this is a conversation that very few people are having, but I would be remiss if I didn't address this. There's nothing about my past or what I've seen or what I've experienced, whether it's Stonewall or Woodstock or, the riots that happened right in my backyard. It doesn't matter that we did call them riots. It doesn't matter about any of that right now. If we don't acknowledge a time in our life where our youth has gone through more tragic transformation and now are rising up. So mark my word on this, Mark. There will be a conversation somebody has maybe a year from now, maybe 5 years from now, and they will see the youth that went through the shootings that happened, that went through so many. You will see them become the next 60s. Where are they now? They're grieving. They don't know what to do. The suicide rate is through the roof. Because to get back to your point, they are not in denial. And this documentary, this film, is so riveting to me. I tried to think of when I saw another film of this nature that literally pinpointed to how these young people have stepped up. And the last time I remember is the Sliwa, when he went in New York and he created his own police, I call him police department, but his own group, community group. And he said, we're going to monitor our streets. What do you think about that, Mark? What do you think about the rising of our youth?
I think that for the youth, they have a lot of things to be afraid of. And the pandemic has changed their world entirely. I mean, how many of these teenagers didn't get a chance to go to their own graduation? Now, that may not seem like a big deal, but I remember when I graduated high school, I felt like for the first time in my life, I really accomplished something big. I got through that. But that was in a time when if you had a problem with somebody in school, you duked it out afterwards. Now they live in fear of somebody coming into their school and shooting people. So there is a terror there. And we saw this particularly after the Parkland shooting, how many of the teens there, I think it was the kid, his last name was Hogg. I think it was David Hogg, something like that. And he went national, and all the kids were talking about, you've got to do something about this. And it's got to be more than you're in our thoughts and prayers. Thoughts and prayers, thoughts and prayers. I'm a firm believer in God helps those who help themselves. You can sit there all day and send happy thoughts at a problem, but you've got to actually do something about it. And I think that this could be the galvanization of the youth, is we're tired of being butchered and shot. Whether it's Virginia Tech or Parkland, I mean, you can just go down the list. It's like all the time there's shooting after shooting after shooting. Why is this happening? What is this pathos? What is going on here? What is the fear? And it comes down to somebody that's doing this has some morbid fear How are we dealing with mentally unstable people in this country? Are we addressing them properly? There are so many things, and I think that this is, Pat. This is what the youth in the '60s did in revolt against being drafted into the Vietnam War and the Vietnam War. I think that this is what's going to be the galvanizing factor. The notable thing is how the COVID-19 pandemic, we haven't really seen too many shootings, or I think there's been one or two, which is, one or two too many. But it's only because it's required a clampdown or people avoiding public things and schools being closed. And that's not good. That's not good. It takes a pandemic to stop shootings. So I think that the youth feeling alienated, feeling victimized, and feeling afraid, I think that this is where they're going to really stand up.
This is really the conversation we started today, where we're talking about freedom. And let's get back to freedom. Freedom, the difference between freedom and not having freedom, it's a thin line, right? We've
Yes.
seen countries all over the world have that thin line. By the way, countries that are divided between free countries, North Korea, South Korea, countries that are like that, it's a thin line that divides them. Literally on a map, it's a thin line, right?
Right.
We're watching Putin, and we're watching some of the countries that drew their thin line and struggle to hold on to that freedom. And I think there is a spiritual nature to freedom, and that's what I try to hold on to in my life, Mark. There's a spiritual nature to freedom, and it's an energy that's very hard to depict. It's the day that your mom and dad says to you something like, "Why don't you take the car, honey?" What? Yeah. Why? Take the car. Here are the keys. Take the car. And you get in the car and you take the car. And here's something we're not talking about. And I read a headline this morning from someone. In the realm of freedom, you either trust or you doubt. And there's a lot of gray area in between it. When mom and dad hand you the car keys and they say, "Honey, why don't you take the car to go to your school dance?" They are saying, "We trust you with this new freedom." See, and that's what I think people in the United States worry about, whether it's an election of a president or it's an election of someone else. We trust you with our freedom. And that is a promise that is made to us. And so what people fear is the loss, not just of the freedom, but the loss of the trust, right?
Yes. And I think, once again, you hit the nail on the head, Dr. Pat. It's fear of loss. One side fears they're going to lose something. The other side fears they're going to lose something. It's the fear of loss. And ultimately, the loss is tied into economics, but not entirely. It's like the people who oppose masks. They feel that this is an infringement on their civil rights. Personally, I don't understand that. And I'm going to go public and say, if you don't like wearing a mask, I'm sure you'll love being on a ventilator. But, because I read the reports that come out of the Mayo Clinic and the World Health Organization, Johns Hopkins, Oxford, the Pasteur Institute, the Japanese Institute of Health. I'm reading what's going on worldwide. And until there is some type of treatment or vaccine, the best protection for yourself and to protect others is to wear a mask. Nobody likes wearing them. I don't like wearing them. I don't think Joe Biden likes wearing them. I don't think Mike Pence likes wearing them. I don't think anybody likes wearing them. But the thing is, it's the same thing to do right now. It's like saying, well, I'm going to swim to the bottom of the ocean, but not use a scuba tank. Okay, well, you can't do that without it. So that is not an infringement on somebody's rights, although the people who are against it fear that it is. And so the fear incites people to do all of these violent and negative behaviors. So fear of loss is what takes someone to foe and also inhibits freedom. Freedom is a philosophical form of government. And I remember studying this in college because I have a degree in political science. And the reason that the US was so worried for a long time, the way communism seemed to be catching on in Asia and Africa, is because if you go to a group of people laying in the mud in Upper Volta and say, well, we'll give you the philosophical construct to make your own decisions, when they're starving, they would rather have a totalitarian regime come in and say, I'm going to guarantee you peace, food, and a roof over your head. Well, people are going to go for that. That's why freedom only works for people who have peace, a roof over their head, and something to eat. That's when you want to go from that to democracy. Well, the United States essentially has that, although a lot of people don't. And so the fears here are how much of government control is there going to be? And that is a fear of losing freedom. Okay. I remember Ronald Reagan said, I'm going to get the government off the backs of the people. Okay. Well, the Democrats believe that the Republicans want to control aspects of your life, and the Republicans believe that the Democrats want to control aspects of your life. So here we go again. It's control. And what is the loss here? What is the fear that you're going to lose is your version of freedom. And that's why I keep getting back to the point that we have to realize that people who have different views than us are not the enemy, and you can't demonize them. You know, I mean, I've heard people say, well, Democrats are just stupid. And then I hear people, well, just Republicans are stupid. Hillary Clinton really put her foot in it when she said, well, the people that support Donald Trump are deplorables. All right, then you start seeing the hashtag deplorable lives matter. Okay. Just because somebody doesn't vote for you doesn't mean they're deplorable and horrible. And that has been a problem from the top all the way down, is the fear. You're turning people that should be your neighbor into your foe because you're afraid that they stand for a freedom that you are going to lose. And I don't really think that that's the case. And I'm hoping that in the bigger scheme of things, most Americans get that.
There is a little country. I call it little. But something happened yesterday. I think we can Google it. I'll spell it. Myanmar. Myanmar. Some people say Myanmar. Some people say Myanmar. And Su'u Ki'i was poised for a second term win. She was. This is a little country. And if you Google it, you will see an image. And what you will see in the image, that people that came out in this, let's call it small country, you will see lines of people. Not only, I wish I had the image to show everybody, but just look. I think NPR had a great photo of it. You see lines of people, not just with masks on. Let me show you what they have on. They have masks, they have face shields, they have hair nets, and the line goes farther and farther out. This was their second chance for freedom. This was a way to step forward and continue to re-elect a chancellor for freedom. 66,000 cases and over 1,500 deaths. And turnout was higher than expected. Millions cast ballots for candidates for freedom. See, that's the energy that's happening here too.
Yes.
As much as we're talking about an election, my hat goes off to 140 plus million people that do remember this is freedom and you have a choice. Because that is the one thing Viktor Frankl did talk about. He says, I have a choice. I have a choice to choose. I will choose what I think. I will choose what I see. I will choose what I put in my mind. But look at this line. If you have a minute to Google this today, Myanmar, 66,000 cases, small, 1,500 deaths, and yet their turnout was reported higher than expected. And they don't have mail-in votes. And so today is for us, as you walk into this week, just say amen to freedom, right, Mark?
That's a fascinating point. This is the biggest voter turnout in history. Now, whether it was fear that did it, it's in the greater sense, seeing that many Americans who care enough or are afraid enough go out and vote. It reminds me of one of my favorite movies, or Monty Python and the Holy Grail. And King Arthur's going by a bunch of peasants, and somebody goes, "Well, how did you get to be king?" He said, "Well, the Lady of the Lake came forth and gave me this sword Excalibur, that I may rule over all of Britain." And the peasants, they're like, "Strange women lying around in ponds distributing swords is no basis for a populist form of government."
Boy, but would I love to see that. Mark, thank you so much for today. And let's remind everybody, a different show tonight at 4:00, The Psychic and the Doc. We're going to come out of the gate with phone lines open because we want to help guide the pathway to really step into the freedom of more than just trust.